we will secure that at least we get at least one commercial partnership. Let's say, for example, getting into the club's internal store, or maybe recurring group orders.
Yeah, right.
So what do you think?
I think that's brilliant. I think very, very spot on, very accurate. And I think it sounds like you've done this before already. That's really good. Yes, I think that's very well done.
I have
Yeah.
already done it, but not
Okay.
in this context. Like our MVP has been doing the testings, these tastings in some exclusive places. I had already the idea, like I brainstormed this idea once, but I want to make it true. So this is my way of manifesting this.
Awesome. Definitely that will come to life. So I know we have so many hands up.
Elliot, I think there's an issue with your mic. Like you're again very far. We don't hear your audio very well. So I think let's go without it.
Thank you. So I was saying, yes, I can see so many hands up. I know people want to share. We'll definitely keep sharing as we go along. We have so many other activities to do as far as sharing goes. Yes, I know Patience is saying my group didn't get to talk today, but we definitely hope you'll share in the next activity, but also definitely there's platforms within the year community and of course your group as well that you could share more of this. But for now,
Yes.
yes.
Just
Yes,
to add
Mila.
on this, Elliot, I know we had a lot of groups, a lot of people want to share. For those who are not able to share today in this big plenum, please, take a screenshot of your filled test card, load it up on the live feed in the group, and people can comment, reflect on it. So you can still share it even after today's session.
100%. Thank you. So Milena and I also took some time to work on an example. Yes, this is very general to just help you in your understanding. So again, let me just walk through one. So again, this is a hypothesis that of course, we believe that millennial parents prefer curated science projects that fit their kids' education level. That's the hypothesis. But then how do you verify that? Of course, then for this particular one, the verification is done with through interviews with 20 millennial parents. And again, take note of the number. Always quantify your test scale so that we know, is this doable or not? And so if you can do numbers or a percentage, that definitely works well. Then regarding the metrics, this is again, how do you know that, what do you measure? What do you look out for? So that then you're able to show that, yes, this is what I measured and this is what the data points that I collected. And of course, so for this is the top customer jobs, pains, and gains that are not being met with existing solutions. And then, of course, how do we know if we are successful? What is the success metrics or criteria? Is if we are 80% accurate in our top jobs, pains, and gains ranking, then that will be a sign of success. Again, as far as success goes, be realistic, because I know some of you want to be perfect. You're like, I'm looking for 100%. You won't always get that in business or in entrepreneurship. So be realistic based on your capacity and of course your resources as well. But again, make this regular so that you keep learning as you go. So yeah, Nirlena, I know we have another practice question, and this is just to gauge your understanding. So there is the example of an MVP below. Of course, your goal is to choose the question that the MVP could best help you validate. So I'm launching a startup for a file sharing service. I'm creating a video with a 3-minute demonstration on how the technology of my service is meant to work. That then leads users to registration form for the launch event. I will share it with my target user base. So which of the 3 options could best help you validate your MVP? A, are investors willing to fund my idea? B, is my user base interested in my service? Or is it C, which features should I prioritize in my service? Can we have the comments in the chat? Not actually comments, answers. What do you think? Is it A, B, or C? Let me have the responses in the chat. Okay, I see so far people are saying B. So others are saying B or C. Okay, let's see, which is the correct answer? Yes, so the correct answer is actually B. Is my user base interested in my service? Again, we say that's where you start gauging the interest in your in the MVP from the user side. And we also have a Menti on the same. Milena, can you help us with that?
Sure. Now we want to really go back to your own business so that you think about either, existing products you have but you haven't validated yet, or even if you're thinking about a new product line or new service you want to offer in your business. So think about what could you actually test, what kind of assumptions.
Okay, I see comments coming up, and I know these are very much business specific, so whatever you type is true. But I see people saying if the clients are open to new services, for sure, test our protein products. If our panels can add acoustic comfort to our users as well. So plus food marketplaces. Okay, I see more comments coming in. That's nice. Keep sharing those. And of course, then we are hoping as you go, when you go back and once we're finished with this masterclass, you can think around how to actually test this, validate these assumptions.
Yes, as you can see, that question is really made for you. So whatever you put in now, also keep yourself responsible of like, okay, let's go into action. Let's really validate or test this assumption with my customers. So we're gonna ask you next week how many of people have done this. So this is more something for you to really think about.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and now we'll get into design thinking. But before just I get there, I know I've seen a question from Tobeka, and I know Tobeka will take note of that. We'll definitely remember to respond to it at the end of this. So keep your questions coming in the chat, and then we'll definitely create time to respond to the same. Now, design thinking, which is, again, in as far as this session goes, the most popular innovation method. Not actually popular, famous, because people already knew about this. So Milena, let's get into the main content. What is design thinking all about? So again, design thinking in itself is also a problem-solving approach beyond it being an innovation approach. But what it emphasizes on is a way of thinking that begins with the understanding of the end users or humans. In most cases, most of our products, there's always a human in the loop, and that's why it's a critical one. 3 key principles that you always have to remember: that it's empathy-driven, so it's really trying to putting yourself in the shoes of the end user. Of course, there is the divergent convergent process. And of course, I have an illustration later to show you what that means. But divergent simply means you're broadening your scope and looking beyond and going out. But of course, you converge now to come together and try to synthesize what that meant. And of course, then it's also prototype centric, which means, and prototype, you could think about it in the sense of like an MVP. So a low version of the solution that could easily be tested quickly and faster. And then that definitely also makes sure that you're getting the right product to the market. Now on to the next slide. So what is design thinking versus what it's not? I know this slide is important because most of us confuse. So remember, design thinking is driven by stakeholders and the project intent. And of course, it's not driven by technological or conceptual solutions. So it's not about what you're thinking of what's possible, but actually what do stakeholders say can be done. But also it's designing a product or service in conjunction with the system it operates in and without thinking about it in isolation. But also remember, it's progressively prototyping, testing, and learning. And when we say progressively, it's a cyclic process that continues and never stops. That's how you stay in business. But also it's very highly collaborative and it's very disciplined, but flexible. Disciplined, but flexible. Okay, so on to the next slide. Now, this is the process, the convergent or divergent and convergent process I was talking about. So of course, we're starting with the empathy stage of the design thinking process, where we are converging to talk to as many people as possible. And then we come back to converge at the define stage, where we're trying to define or make sense of what we heard from the empathy stage from the people we talked to. And of course, from that stage, we again diverging with co-designing, where we're bringing together as many stakeholders as possible that are involved in the product or in the problem or in the solution to try to come up with ideas. And of course, once we get those, we converge again at implementation, where we are optimizing what works. Okay, moving on. Now, remember, design thinking is more than just a process. It's actually a way of looking at the world. And I would like you to remember this as a mindset. So beyond it being an innovation methodology, if you can get this as a mindset, it will be a game changer for you. Because we're looking at complex things. Most of the problems, if not all, that you're solving are actually very complex. In systems world, we call it wicked. And because of this, you definitely have to have a mindset that continuously considers other voices, continuously prototyping, but also then trying to optimize what works. But also being able to tolerate ambiguity, because nothing will be things will not always be clear, but also then coming up with those experiments and learning when they fail or when they succeed, and knowing what to optimize also makes a huge difference. Okay, moving on. Now, there is the traditional thinking, and that's why I'm saying this is more than just a methodology, it's a mindset. And why am I saying that? Because traditional thinking will tell you, just go with what's logical. However, design thinking tells you there's actually emotion and empathy attached to things. You definitely have to consider that. The traditional thinking, again, will tell you just presume the solution. Whatever you think could work, works. But however, design thinking reminds you that context matters. But of course, also, there is the feeling that you always have to be quick in moving and deciding things. But however, decisions should only be made based on some information that you've explored. So be more quick to explore, to learn, and be willing to have conversations, and without having the need to just always rush to decisions. Now, traditional thinking will tell you there is right or wrong, but actually design thinking will tell you there's only better. So yes, something may be, the rest of the world may consider it wrong. However, for you, when you look at it, you're thinking what can be done better as far as this goes. And again, it's not always about results. It's about meaning and value, because of the number of stakeholders that are involved, especially the end user. So if you're giving value and meaning to your end users or your customers, then I think you're on the right track. So moving on. Now, before you start the whole process of design thinking, you definitely have to start with an intention. And that's where you're asking yourself, what am I trying to achieve and what's the challenge at hand? That's where you start. Start with the intention and the design challenge at hand. Now, on to the next slide. How do we, once you've started with, of course, the intention of what you want to create and the challenge at hand, then of course you have to empathize. That's the first stage from our framework that we shared earlier. Empathy is all about understanding the end user's lived experiences, like we said. Now, on to the next slide. How do we actually achieve this empathy? Now, you could do this in a couple of ways. Of course, one is through what we are calling conducting research. And again, this could be both primary and secondary. Primary research is where you're holding interviews, focus group discussions with potential sort of stakeholders involved in that particular problem, listening to them. But of course, then you could also do secondary research, where you go online and try to learn as much as possible in terms of what has been published out there. And of course, learning from that before you go primary. Primary is a bit more expensive, but however, secondary is less expensive. So depending on the resources you have at hand, you can choose which approach to go for. The next slide. After you've been able to empathize and understood your customers or your end users or your stakeholders, then you want to define the problem. Defining simply means making sense of what you've heard from the empathy stage. Now, How do you achieve this? On to the next slide. Of course, you can make sense of what you've had by starting by actually observing collectively with your team. And of course, this is when you come together with your project team or maybe your co-founders if you have those. Of course, the goal is for you to go through the data points that you've collected from the empathy stage and try to understand what does this data tell us. If you get an answer to that, you'll be ready to move to the next stage. And the next stage is moving on to the next. Actually, before we move on to the next one, I also wanted to highlight this framework that helps you make sense of what you've had, which is what we are calling the root cause analysis. It helps you drill down to the 5 whys. And basically what this methodology tells you is that whenever you have a problem that you're addressing currently, think about it. Ask yourself if that is actually the problem or is it a symptom? You don't want to build your business around a symptom. You want to build it around the root cause. And this 5 whys framework helps you to narrow down to the root cause so that once you identify the root cause, you've built your business on what we call solid grounds. So again, the practice is ask yourself why the problem is happening continuously up to the point when you will feel like, I think there is nothing else to say, and we can assume that that is the root cause. Okay. Moving on, Milena. Now, let's try to practice, and probably we can just have one person help practice this. And actually, okay, Milena, can we skip this for now and do the Menti instead? Because I think just because of the time factor. Okay, so we'll have a Menti at the end that will also just bring that concept together. So then after you've been able to define, and like I said, defining is you trying to make sense of what the problem actually is. Then of course, then we have the co-design phase. And like I said, this could be different names. Some people call it ideate, where you're bringing together different people to try to come up with concepts or ideas that could help address that particular problem. Now, as you move on to the next slide, you may ask yourself, why do we need to co-design? Because in most cases, it's a very expensive endeavor. However, there is an aspect of empowerment that you need to achieve, especially if you're solving problems that are wicked and are complex. You want to empower the people that are involved, and you want to show that you're collaborating with them. You also want to show that you're humble enough to listen to them and that the ideas actually matter. Hence, you're very democratic. But also we say design thinking is about flexibility. So it's not just about what you know, but what others can also tell you about your perspectives. And that matters. But then the most important one is the ownership and sustainability. The fact that if you're able to involve your customers in the process of building, actually they will be able to own the product when it's ready for the market. Okay, then moving on. Of course, this is the stage where now you come together, do the ideation. Of course, some of the key ideation tips, probably one that I'll emphasize is the more the better. So don't try to shut down those voices that are on the edge. Try to listen to as many ideas as possible. The chances of getting a good idea is based on the quantity that you can get from the very beginning. But of course, then be very much open to listening to new ways of thinking. Okay, moving on. Now, you've come up with so many ideas, like I said, because you assembled so many stakeholders to speak to. So how do you decide which idea to take forward? So you could easily use this framework, the feasibility, desirability, and viability framework, and whichever idea that will be at the center of that framework would actually be a good idea that you can take forward. So desirability is all about, do people actually want to use this? Is it desirable by the people? Do they like it? Is it appealing? Feasibility then speaks to, is it actually even possible to do it at scale? And of course, then viability is it actually practical, and can we actually scale this beyond the existing, what I would call MVP that we've done, or beyond the experiment? So those ideas can be subjected through this framework and then help you arrive at a few or one that you could take on forward as the solution to the problem. Okay, moving on. So some of the key elements, of course, after now you've been able to co-design, you've come up with an idea, you always have to put that idea into something that is quantifiable, what we are calling a prototype. So a prototype, and in the next slide, as Milen actually could move to the next slide, you will see how do you represent that prototype. So remember, people only sort of tend to be moved by things that they can see or at least feel. And so you want to either package that concept or idea into a prototype, which could be a diagram in the simplest version of it. It could be a meeting. If it's not one of those physical products, it's just a service, then think of implementing it within a meeting setup with a group of people. You could design models, or if it's a tech product, then you could actually just develop wireframes. And of course, then these ones will be ready for testing. Now, on to the next slide. Once now you've developed the prototypes, your goal is to be able to implement this. First of all, validate, then implement. This is when the testing comes to place. Of course, you want to take it to a select group of users, test it with them, and see if it works. Now, as you move to the next slide, we will see how do you actually test? So again, the goal of this testing phase at the end of the day is for you to have a set of at least interventions that have been piloted. And of course, the pilot will be done in the same manner as we did the experiments in the first methodology that we looked at. So getting that assumption, creating the prototype, taking it to the people, measuring that, and of course, deciding what metrics we will measure and how success will look like. Okay, moving on. Now, remember why we need to validate is always so that we de-risk. And this is also the same thing we talked about in Lean Startup. It's the same in design thinking. So as in this, you could use this, what I would call a framework or basically graph for you to ascertain when is it ready to launch. So of course, on the y-axis, we have from low to high error or risk involved. And then of course, with the project timeline. So of course, you're starting with the prototyping. Of course, as you go along, it will be definitely too late to validate as you go along. And that's why prototyping has always to happen and validation of the same has to happen earlier, because the higher you go, the higher you go in terms of the project timeline or the startup timeline, the riskier it becomes, and hence always prioritize to de-risk early on. Okay, moving on. And of course, we have an interesting mentee here to help you think about what we've just shared. Milena, can you help us with this?
Sure. So the question is, you're designing a community program to reduce plastic waste. What should be your first step using design thinking? A, brainstorm all possible solutions immediately, spend time observing and interviewing community members to understand their relationship with plastic, create a detailed implementation plan, or build a perfect prototype before testing anything. And I think people have listened to you.
I see. The message actually landed.
Perfect. That
Okay.
was the correct answer.
Right.
Next one is, what's the primary purpose of prototyping in design thinking? To create a perfect final product, to impress investors with polished designs, to test assumption and learn quickly from failures using low-cost experiments, and to prove you're right about what customers need. And once again, it's good to validate that all of you are actually listening. Great. Back to you. Oh, no, actually another question, but do you want to give the context, Elliot?
Yes. Again, so in the spirit of design thinking, we are asking ourselves, look, again, the goal is for us to be able to implement all these methodologies we are learning in our businesses, but we are trying to think before, have you ever faced a problem within your business, like a time when you assumed that you actually, you knew what your customers wanted, but you were wrong. and how would design thinking then emphasize thinking's emphasis on empathy have changed that approach? So reflecting on some of the assumptions you had before within your business, is there anything that you think design thinking would have changed things based on what you've learned so far? And again, that's open-ended, so feel free to drop those. And I know the responses to this could be like involve a lot of thinking because there's a lot of remembering of what happened previously. But again, you could try to package it in the shortest statement possible. And let's see. So people before, people first. I see that. So realizing our solution served a different customer segment than we expected. Oh, that's that's a disappointment. But I hope then design thing would have helped you know how to pivot accordingly. And I see more responses coming. Okay, this is great to see. Okay. So for fast, fail fast, go forward. I like that statement. Fail fast, go forward. And that's also in the spirit of innovation. Okay.
I just want to emphasize one statement. And I'm going to read it out. I thought our customers cared if the product was sustainable. However, their main concern was price and cultural fit. I think we touched upon this very shortly, and we will also throughout this bootcamp. We are now kind of like still in a very conscious bubble, right? Like we are all in like the sustainability bubble. We would like to move forward on the planet, but in reality, we still need to do quite a lot of advocacy work as well to really make the majority of the world believe it is urgent now. We all need to go into sustainability. So that's why it is very crucial for all of your businesses basically to have the sustainability aspect and use it as one of the unique selling points, but not only, right? So to also really check on who are your customers. And that's what I also mentioned, like depending on which markets you're addressing, right? Like it can be different depending if you're exporting to the European market versus the American market versus the African market, right? So that's also really important. And we touch upon that also in the marketing class later on, and also the sustainability standards next week. How to frame, your positioning when, basically. And yeah, looking at the clock, thanks all for your answers. We will read through them and we move on.
Yes, thank you. So again, this first two are, in my opinion, some of the most critical methodologies. But of course, then there are others that you mentioned even in the beginning, that yes, there exist other methodologies. But at this point, we will just scan through some of them. And of course, then have some mentees to interact with. And of course, after that, we will close. So what is our first one to just quickly scan through? So of course, we have also the business design, which is also definitely another innovation methodology. And it's all about having a holistic approach to creating transformation, especially looking at all the business systems and models and structures without just focusing on one. So the principles here, we're focusing on systems thinking, where we're not just looking at a linear way of what the problem is, but looking at how is it connected with the others. Then, of course, the value architecture, which is always focuses on designing value flows between all stakeholders and not just focusing on one. But then, of course, also the business model innovation. So thinking around, if this is affecting this component of my business model canvas, like say customers, is there any other pillar that is also affected with the same? And then moving on. Yeah, so we can have a mentee around that. And
yeah, so
Elena?
the question is, I'm the reader of all the questions here. Yes. A solar panel installation company is struggling with low profit margins. Which approach best reflects business design methodology? A, reduce installation costs by finding cheaper suppliers. B, redesign the entire business model to offer solar as a service with monthly subscriptions instead of one-time sales. Improve marketing to attract more customers, or add battery storage products to the existing sales model. Back to you, Elliot, to comment.
Yes, I see the responses are coming in. Let us know which is the correct answer. Aha, I see majority got it. Of course, we have a few that thought otherwise. But of course, there's always a reason why. But yes, majority definitely, it's definitely being able to redesign the entire business. But like I said, this business design method is always about looking at the interconnectedness of the business components. Okay, on to the next one.
So, what distinguishes business design from traditional business improvement? A, business design focuses only on reducing costs. B, business design views the business as an interconnected system requiring holistic redesign. Business design only applies to startups, not existing businesses. Or business design focuses exclusively on customer experience. And I feel like you took it a little bit away. And indeed, it is about the interconnectedness systems on focusing on a holistic redesign. Well done, everyone.
Good to know people are listening. So for this one, I want to give them after, maybe as takeaway assignment, so that then we focus on, yes, the other methodologies, and also just on the sort of the multiple choices ones. So the agile methodologies also came up during the session, and we'll learn on to the next slide. So agile methodologies, it's all about iterative development approach. Iterative it's from the word iteration, which means having different versions of the same product. And that's Apple is so good at doing that. Every year they're giving us a new version of the iPhone. So that's different iterations of the same product. So principles of such a methodology is, of course, iterative development, which is work is broken into short cycles or sprints, of course, with this regular delivery of working solutions. So that, yes, you may have so many ideas of what to implement, but then spreading that over time. But of course, it's also very collaborative and, of course, very adaptive. So adaptive is where your plans are treated as living documents as opposed to like casting stone, this is it, this is final. So very much adaptive and live. Okay, we have a mentee around the same to help you learn more. So Milena.
So here the question is, you're composting business plan to launch in schools, but early feedback shows restaurants are more interested. What's the most agile response? So have the hat on from that methodology. A, stick to the school plan since you already invested resources. Immediately pivot entirely to restaurants and abandon schools. C, complete the current 2-week sprint with schools, then assess and adapt the next sprint towards restaurants. Or create a 6-month detailed plan for the restaurant market before taking action. And the answers are coming in.
Coming in fast. And yes, majority got it. It's definitely you being able to complete the current 2-week sprint. Again, it's a 2-week sprint, so that's why it's been shortened thanks to the methodology. And then, of course, then assess and adapt. And that's what we talked about, the method being able to assess and adapt on the go. Okay, do we have another one? Yes, so this one also, I'll definitely provide it as one of those reflections after. But then we also have another methodology again, and I know we're just sort of mentioning some of these methodologies and giving you a mentee to sort of try to understand, but you can definitely do your own research more around the same. So as far as change management goes, of course, it's a structured approach to transitioning either individuals, teams, or organizations from the current state to a future desired state. And of course, some of the principles that you have to be human-centered because it's about human-centered transformation. And then, of course, also stakeholder engagement. So thinking around who is involved and how do we bring them together and aligned. And then, of course, it's also about transition management, so that it's not just about thinking about the result, but thinking around how do we recognize that this process has actually like components to it, and how do we transition smoothly.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe let me add one sentence on this, Elliot. I think this gets very important as you grow. The bigger your team is you're leading, the more employees you are having, the more important it is to also really think about them and like how do they actually also engage with you, how do they accept change. So communication is super key to also keep the motivation high in the team. And yeah, that's something I can announce as an employee. That's very important for any kind of like change. Make sure you you communicate that clearly and have really the humans at the center.
Sure. We have a practice question for it. Take it
So
away.
your team is resistant to adopting a new organic certification process that requires detailed record keeping. What's the best change management? A, mandate the change immediately and discipline those who don't comply. Understand their concerns, involve them in design and the implementation process, and provide training and support. Abandon the certification since the team is resistant. Hire new staff who are already comfortable with documentation. I think, yes, perfect.
Clearly, people are very human here. It's definitely the
That's how
response
we
of
should be. Exactly. I think the answers
always.
were too easy. Options, Elliot.
Again, the goal was not to test your intelligence, but more of your understanding. So thank you. That was well done. Then we also have another one, of course, open innovation, and that this also was mentioned in our initial Menti. So what is this all about? So Milena, on to the next slide. So this is where we're thinking about a paradigm where, again, organizations deliberately use external knowledge or resources and partnerships along their own internal research and development. And the goal is for them to be able to accelerate innovation and expand markets for the innovation use. And so the principles around, of course, being able to be permeable. So boundary permeable is meaning you can easily sort of cross over the boundary to external and back. But also it's very collaborative, where you're looking at an industry level and thinking who can help me get better. But it's also very resource optimized, focused on resource optimization, where you're thinking, I have these resources, how do I make the best of it? Aha, and then let's see if we can get this from a Menti. Yes.
So, a reforestation startup is struggling to develop technology for monitoring tree survival rates. What's the best open innovation approach? Keep trying to develop the technology internally to maintain the competitive advantage, partner with a university research lab or tech company that has relevant experience. Give up on monitoring technology entirely, or copy a competitor's monitoring system.
I see. We have most people going for definitely a partnership with institutions to bring this to them. And yes, that's in the spirit of the open innovation methodology. Someone asked who owns the IP. The IP definitely still holds with the original owner. So just because you're inviting people to collaborate, it doesn't mean that it's sort of like giving away your IP, but of course we'll have a whole session around IP, but it could also be, since it's collaborative, then thinking around a collaborative IP structure. Okay.
Yes, but it's indeed a very good question to ask and also to be mindful about it, right, at the end. So we have a dedicated session on IP led by our partners from the World Intellectual Property Organization. So we deep dive there, and you can keep also all of your questions IP and patent related to that. Good. I'm mindful on the time, so I think we should skip this and go to the last future foresight. And we're gonna upload basically all the slides so you can have a bit more in depth for those innovation methodologies you're interested in.
For sure. So then probably this is the methodology that no one mentioned earlier because it's, I guess, only heard in small circles. Again, futures studies and foresight is one of those that looks at a systematic exploration of what's possible, what's probable, and what's preferable. So we're building a possible future, a probable future, and a preferred future. So of course, then the principles around multiple futures thinking, when you're not thinking, just thinking about the present, but what could be possible and preferred into the long term, but also, of course, a long-term perspective, not just thinking about the present, and very anticipatory in nature. So thinking about what next, what could come. Okay, and we can have a mentee to help you understand even better. We could just do one. Elena?
Yes. So imagine 3 different scenarios for how climate policy could evolve in your country over the next 10 years. Optimistic, pessimistic, and surprising. How would each scenario impact your green business, and what would you do today to prepare for or influence these futures? So have that in mind, and I open up the question where it's an open-ended one. So how would each scenario impact your green business, and what would you do today to prepare for our influence or influence these futures? So someone already answers, someone would diversify materials, build adaptive teams, and engage in policy dialogue to shape a resilient future. Yes, that's also. I keep this open so you can keep answering this question. I would like you to reflect on it as well, like which are the different angles you should use based also from your maybe your sourcing, resilient value chains, right? Like with climate change, there's way and more risk on extreme weather, logistics, but also on the policy domain on how you could actually influence.
For sure. And also the assignment can be shared after. And then, of course, it will also give you the chance, and together with the other questions that we sort of put forward, we will definitely give you to reflect along, because this has been a very intensive and exciting session. Now, as we close, I just want to take a few seconds to respond to the question that was asked earlier, and someone was keen to know how much time should they dedicate to the testing phase?
Elliot, one suggestion, because we're over the time. I suggest that I'm gonna go forward, give you the few kind of like logistics wrap-up moments. We take a picture for those who can stay on longer. We can stay on with Elliot for the Q&A, so you can ask your questions. And then for those who need to leave, you can watch the recording, and we take it from there. All right. Perfect. Good. So yeah, let's do a quick picture first. Let me stop my sharing the screen so I have more. Those who have not switched on their camera, please do so now. So I have you more on the screen, and I can change that. All right. So please smile. So 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so that is done. Then let me share my screen again. So a few reminders. I already mentioned at the beginning of the class, we need you to activate your Ye community accounts. Some of you have not activated your accounts, meaning we are not able to fully, or you're not able to fully use all the opportunities on the platform. We store all the recordings, all the slides always on the platform, and you're also able to then get in contact to chat with each other. I received quite a lot of messages of people who would like to be introduced to certain people from certain regions. And this is all what you can do by yourself in the Bootcamp group, or by using the data database map function on the Yay community platform as such. You can really filter for people in your region and then directly contact them. So please activate your accounts. Then secondly, also for tracking purposes, I would like you to please always sign up with the same email address. So for one person, use the same email address. So it's easier for us to actually track your attendance throughout the program. Then we have next week our masterclass on sustainability standards on 8th of October. And for those who still haven't done it, join our WhatsApp group. I'm going to put it in the chat again. And as usual, the regional spotlight group meetings will continue, so you can really reflect also on each week's content and get to know each other better. We have also now newly introduced a new feature for the participants of the bootcamp, which is the coffee chats. So it's the Yayco coffee chats. You will receive this afternoon an email from a company called Orbit, which invites you to sign up or to opt in into that coffee chat. So if you are available, you click on your available times, and then we match you with three other people from the bootcamp. So you have half an hour time to get to know each other. You get matched. And this is a way on how you can actually build valuable connections and partnerships throughout this program. This will happen now on a bi-weekly basis, so every 2 weeks. So I would really encourage you to take the best of this and to really get to know each other more closely. So to recap, the registration is opening from this afternoon as soon as you get the email all the way until the 3rd of October. So you need to accept during that time window. And then the conversations will take place on the 6th and 7th of October, depending on your availability slots. Good. That's it from my side. So back to Elliot on the questions. And for those who have to leave, thank you so much for spending 6 more minutes with us. And back to you, Elliot, for the questions.
Thank you. Elena, there's one for you around how do they share their assignments?
You first need to speak about the assignment. Maybe that's the start. So on assignments in general, these are encouragements for us to really reflect. We encourage you to put them up on the live feed so that people can comment on it. It's nothing we're gonna track. We are all old enough. It's not a homework we're gonna grade, but it's an encouragement for you to really reflect and deep dive into the materials.
Thank you. So yes, just like Milena mentioned, I think if you have to rush into another meeting, please do so, and the recording will be provided. But if you have any questions, I'm here. I can spend up to probably 5 to 10 minutes to answer your questions. So there was one that I wanted to start with. How much time should one dedicate to the testing phase? Again, the goal of the testing phase is 2 things. One, you have to be quick and cheap in the testing phase. So again, cheap and quick are very relative words. It doesn't mean anything. Quick to you could be 1 month, to another person it could be 3 years. So again, based on the experiment you've designed, you would actually know how much time it will take you to do the experiment, and it's the easiest way to arrive at that. And also that speaks to how many people should you involve. It's all about what will be cheap for you or affordable, and what will take the ideal time for you based on the resources you have. So feel no pressure to match a certain standard. It's all about what you can do in the most cheaply and the most cost effective, in the quickest way possible. I don't know if we have any other questions that came about, or someone wants to ask something else.
Yeah, for any questions, please raise up your hand and then we can take you on.
And yes, I see
Okay.
people. Okay.
Yes, Tobeka, over to you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I wanted to find out, when it comes to the business design methodology, does that speak to more businesses that are at commercialization stage, that have gone to actual customers? Because I saw it was relating more to centered around customers. Not sure if I understood that methodology quite well.
Okay, thanks for that question. It definitely goes beyond customers, and it can definitely be used beyond businesses that are commercializing. The idea around the methodology is for you to think around your business, not just as, so the idea is for you to think about the problem, not just as a problem, but how it affects the rest of the business. So earlier on in the, probably last week, we had a conversation around business model canvas, where we identified the different building pillars that actually build the canvas. So thinking about all those components from activities, partners, customers, relationships, and all that. So whenever you're faced with a problem that needs innovation, is for you to, or needs to be solved, it's for you to think around, yes, as I do this, how does it affect the other components of the business, so that you think about a holistic approach and not just a linear one-sided. So it can be applied by all of them, and definitely goes beyond just customers. Okay, Ramata?
Great presentation. Thank you very much. I think my question is also an innovation impact. When you're trying to measure innovation, what are the effective ways for small businesses to measure the impact of innovation initiatives on both customer satisfaction and business growth, especially businesses in agriculture, because that's my sector? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. For sure, whenever you set out to do any sort of innovation, we definitely have to have what we usually call an M&E framework, right? A monitoring and evaluation framework. And that helps you identify what basically we're calling in the session metrics that you'll be looking out to measure, okay? And again, so for example, if the focus is on customer satisfaction, so you're trying to innovate around the same, you would want then to identify what are those things that will tell you, or what are those metrics that will tell you that a customer is satisfied. For example, based on the product you're offering, how would you know your customer is satisfied? Of course, it could be so many. It could be feedback you get, the reviews they give you. It could be many of those things that you've integrated within the business to give you feedback. And that's why you said, once you build the feedback loop, and you get that feedback, you can definitely know how to pick it. And of course, now based on the what I would call, based on the platforms that you're using to capture that, you could always use that to measure the impact. As far as the business growth goes, this is all, of course, coming to the side of what kind of business growth are you looking at? Are you looking at revenue growth? Are you looking at market expansion? Are you looking at many other aspects that we call business growth, or just moving to a new geographical location altogether and all that? So whenever you have identified those are the key metrics that speak to your business growth, then of course the numbers will tell you how the customers are increasing, or how the profits are doing, or how the expansion is happening. So there's definitely that whole framework that will guide you. Okay, great. Milena, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add. I would say I'm counting down to from 5 to 0. And if there are no other further questions, we can close today's session. And then we're looking forward to see you next time. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Perfect. Let's give a big shout out to Elliot. Thank you so much for today. Use the emojis for that. They are coming in awesome. And I hope you learned a lot today. Please have a look at your emails. So to make the most also in the connections between the two of you. We are a big group, so it is also really on you to reach out to others. And not only by our introduction one by one. You can use the platform, but also use the coffee chats, your regional spotlight groups, and so much more. So thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, afternoon, morning, depending on where you are. Bye.
Bye.